Hello, I'm Sassafras and this is Sirius and we are the Introvert Circus, and today's video is a fun one. It's going to be a little more of a sit down video, and it's one that has been requested and it's one I've been wanting to make, and it is responding to your assumptions and also answering your questions about Newfoundlands as a breed. So I am really excited to get into that. I put a request out for questions and assumptions on Sirius's Instagram as well as my Instagram and Facebook. I think also my Twitter. All of those links are always in the description box below, so come follow us if you haven't already. And there's so much to talk about here, so I'm going to get into that pretty quickly. I do just want to start by saying, obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of assumptions or information about the breed. If you're interested in Newfoundlands as a breed, I really encourage you to do as much research as you possibly can. Definitely check out the National Newfoundland Club of America. American Kennel Club has amazing resources as well about the breed. Get in touch with your local chapter of your Newfoundland Breed Club. Amazing resources, and do as much research as you possibly can about these dogs before you bring one home. So I wanted to make this video because, like all dog breeds, there's a lot of assumptions that get made. I have my tiny, slightly outdated breed book, and here's what some kind of the gist of what you learn about the Newfoundland if you do a little bit of research. They're really big, they're friendly, these are kinds of things. They're used by fisheries to pull nets ashore, pull from boats, blah, 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 right? Like, this is kind of what people know. They swim, they're big. And that's really it. And I want to go into this a little bit more because oftentimes we set ourselves up, and worst of all, we set dogs up to fail by making really big assumptions about them and generalizations about them. And I just want to demystify that a little bit. So that's what we're going to do today, and answer some of your questions about this really cool breed that I'm completely obsessed with. Okay, I have them pulled up on my phone. Okay. First assumption or question, this one's an assumption, is they are equal parts drool, fur, and unconditional love. And that's absolutely true. They are grooming intensive dogs. She's like napped out right now. Grooming intensive. They are very, very drooly, and they're also really loving dogs. I think any breed description about Newfoundlands will tell you these are dogs that want to be near their people. They don't do well. And no dog, very few dogs, do well being left alone for long periods of time. They're dogs that want to be engaged with you. They want to do things. They are part of the working group. They are active dogs. And so that unconditional love is also unconditional interest in doing things, being near where you are. The next question is, this is sort of more of an assumption that they are nannies. This is sort of like nanny dog mythology, or as I like to call it, the nanny dog mythology. And it was their good, sort of the question was that all Newfoundlands are good with kids. And I think this is one of those things that gets under my skin a little bit, and it's because of the stereotypes of how we fail dogs. So Newfoundlands are often depicted as nanny dogs, and that comes from, the history of the breed, and also depictions from Peter Pan. Contrary to what Disney did to Nana by making Nana into kind of a Saint Bernard, Nana in the original J.M. Barrie Peter Pan is a Newfoundland. And I just want to say that no dog, regardless of breed, regardless of how sweet-tempered that breed or that individual dog might be, should be put in a position where they have to be responsible for children. And I say that, and that sounds obvious, I know, but in reality, we see dogs get failed all the time by being put in positions in homes where parents don't watch their children, and they expect dogs to be these giant stuffed animals, and they're not. Are Newfoundlands great? Absolutely. Are Newfoundlands great with kids? Some are. They're also 100+ pounds of dog, of big, muscly, energetic dog, and that's a recipe for disaster in a lot of situations. I also think it's important to think about sort of this idea of like that Newfoundlands are good with kids, or like what I'm calling the nanny mythology, with the understanding of what we expect of dogs in terms of how they're going to behave with children in 2020 is really different than how we expected dogs to interact with children in 1900 when J.M. Barrie was writing Peter Pan. These are very, very different sets of expectations, and to expect our dogs to be, just these placid stuffed animals is not fair to them. They are still dogs. They deserve to have boundaries, and they deserve to have their own space and not be a plaything for children. So this is one of those assumptions about the breed that just gets under my skin. I talk parents out of getting Newfoundlands all the time. I mean, not now because there's a pandemic and I don't see anybody, but so many times we've been at the beach, we've been on walks, and we'll be, approached, or someone will try to talk to us, and it's almost always these like parents with multiple small children who look frazzled, trying to keep their kids together on the beach, and inevitably they're like, we're thinking about getting a Newfoundland, and I'm like, please do not get a Newfoundland. You don't want one. And there are exceptions to this, but if you are a young parent with young kids, and you're busy and you're going lots of places and you're stressed out, do not get a dog that is literally going to be a puppy for 3 or 4 years. It's not fair to that puppy. It is not fair to that dog. And your Noof might grow up and be awesome with your kids. And your Noof might also be a rambunctious puppy teenager and knock your kids over. So this is one of those things. I talk people out of getting Noofs all the time. I think it's part of being a responsible breed ambassador, is telling people the truth about what it's like to live with them. And the reality is, I don't think that in a lot of homes, in busy homes, in what our current 2020 is weird, but in our current culture where you've got Little League and you've got basketball and you've got soccer and you've got dance and you've got after school and you've got somebody working all day, that is not a recipe. I don't think that's actually a good recipe for really any dog. And I have lots of unpopular opinions about this. If you follow me on social media, you probably know this. I think that a lot of homes actually are really awful homes for dogs, and that just because you want a dog doesn't mean you actually are prepared and capable of giving a dog the kind of enriched life that they need. That aside, particularly when it comes for this video for Newfoundlands, if you've got a really busy schedule and you don't have time to dedicate to that dog, it's not the breed for you. Next question. They are expensive. Truth. Or this was an assumption, I guess. Truth. They are very expensive dogs in a variety of ways. So that is both in the care and feeding of them, from vet costs, both routine and the potential for there to be ongoing larger medical concerns. Just to be real, they're expensive dogs. Any dog that is responsibly, ethically bred with all of the kinds of genetic testing that you want to do before you ethically breed a dog is going to be expensive, and Newfoundlands are no exception. There aren't that many of them. They're very big. They are expensive to keep well. They're expensive to breed well. So you're going to pay a lot for a Newfoundland puppy. Newfoundland dogs in rescue, amazing option for getting a Newfoundland. Those dogs are also likely to be expensive. Maybe not in the amount that you spend rescuing the dog, but in terms of keeping that dog. So a lot, unfortunately, of Noofs that end up in rescue are Noofs that are coming out of puppy mills. That's why they end up in rescue. And so they are very likely to have large amounts of health conditions, from skin issues to heart to orthopedic issues, bad hips, anything. And that's going to be expensive to treat. So be prepared for that. It's absolutely worth it, but be realistic about your budget. I think that that's something that prospective Noof owners really need to think about is, are you prepared? Are you able to financially support the dog? And also that everything is more expensive. When you have a giant, everything about having a giant is expensive. Let's see if we can show her better. Can we see you? Oh, she's sleeping. Everything about them is expensive, from the food. High quality food isn't cheap. High quality food for a dog that's over 100 pounds, not cheap. Big toys have big price tags. Big beds have big price tags. Everything, collars, everything that you're going to need for your dog is going to be more expensive because it's going to be larger. Similarly, things like medication is going to be more expensive. Both your regular flea tick, heartworm preventative medication, and if your dog, for whatever reason, needs any kind of prescription medication, that's expensive with these guys. Because you're basically getting a human-sized dose of medication without some of the discounts that might come if you have prescription insurance, that kind of thing. So medication's expensive, surgical procedure, spay, neutering, all that is going to be more expensive with a giant dog. So just something to be prepared for. This is a really good question. Question was, what is their drive like? Are they slow or fast learners? So Newfs are incredibly fast learners. I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions about them. People are like, oh, they're stubborn. Oh, they're not very smart. And that is absolutely not the case. They're incredibly smart. And like some other breeds, they're also very sensitive. So they respond really, really well to training. They pick up skills incredibly quickly. I'm always just like mind blown by how quickly she picks things up. And how easy it is to teach her various skills and her interest in it. But she also has a lot of thoughts about it. So I would say that they are not like border collies in terms of biddability. They want to do things and they want to learn things and they want to work with you, but they also are going to think about it and are like, does that make sense? And they definitely want like to have a little bit of an opinion in that, which I love. And so I love that she, you know, clearly has things that she loves to do, and you know that she loves to do them. And in terms of drive, a lot of that is going to depend on the line. She comes from a line of pretty active obedience Newfs. I would say she has a lot of drive, like, and a lot of the Newfs I know, and that may be virtue of kind of the circles that I run in of people that do a lot of water work, draft, rally sports with their Newfs. They are pretty high drive in terms of for giants. They also take big naps. So it's kind of an interesting, I love that off switch. But yeah, when they are on in a big way. So, but their drive is really, again, different, I would say, than a lot of herding dogs. You know, I've had herding dogs. It's really different to work with in Newfoundland because they have thoughts and opinions, and they definitely have a sense of right and fair and what makes sense. So they respond beautifully to, like all dogs, to positive reinforcement training and huge toy dogs. They tend to have a great toy drive, especially if you build that with them. So they are tons of fun to train. And it makes me really sad when I see people who, you know, in like pet Newfoundland groups that are like, oh, they're stubborn, oh, they're not very smart, they're lazy, when that really could not be further from the truth in terms of what I've experienced with Newfoundlands and what I see with other Newfoundlands. They will rise to the occasion. They want to work, they want to learn, they want to do things, and they have an amazing mind and ability to really quickly put pieces together and puzzle things out and figure it out, which is really, really fun to do with tricks. It's why I really like doing tricks with her, honestly, because we can put together lots of pieces really quickly and gain new skills. Okay, this is assumption that they're very strong with a big bark and lots of drool. Absolutely. They are incredibly strong dogs. And this goes back to why I don't actually think they're great dogs for a lot of families with children. If you're a dog family, if you're prepared to do that work, if there's adults in the family that are committed and ready to do that, then yeah, they can be great. But they're a lot of dog. And I think some people really miss the mark on that by a lot of the assumptions that they're sweet, they're teddy bears. They are a dog. First and foremost, they are dogs, and they are dogs that are over 100 pounds, you know, and they're strong. They're working breed dogs. And if you are not ready for that, if you are not ready to work with them and to train them in positive ways, that's a recipe for absolute disaster. And it's why a lot of Newfoundlands who people get without having done enough research, which is then unfortunately mostly Newfoundlands that are purchased from pet stores, end up in rescue, because responsible breeders are doing this vetting. They're talking to people. They're finding out if they are really ready and prepared to bring a Newfoundland home, because they are not like other dogs. I say, by which I mean giants aren't like other dogs. And I think until you have had a giant, you don't fully understand how different it is to live with a dog that is the size of a human, like an adult human. Oh yeah, and they have a huge bark. That was the other assumption in there. Yeah, they're super loud when they bark, and they're barky. They have a lot to say. Many of them have big opinions, and they communicate those opinions. And so you have to be prepared for that and think that that's fun. And I certainly do, but it is not for everyone. So our next question or assumption is that they are gentle. So this is one of, I will say, my pet peeves about assumptions that get made about Newfoundlands. They are gentle, but they are dogs, first and foremost. And so I think that gentleness, kindness is a hallmark of the breed, gets thrown around a lot, sort of in depictions of, or like descriptions of the breed. And that's true. They are really sweet dogs, but they are first and foremost dogs. And the way that we expect dogs in contemporary society, particularly talking about contemporary American society, to be these walking robot stuffed animals is completely unfair. First and foremost, they're dogs. And so while they are gentle for their size, and that's true, I don't think that they are, if you are looking for, this like teddy bear, there's exceptions. There absolutely are, therapy dogs who are Newfoundlands. That is, I would say, an exception compared to what most Newfoundlands are for a lot of their life, which are very big, active, adolescent dogs. Certainly when they're adolescents, they're very active. But even adult dogs, like, are they gentle for their breed, for their size? Absolutely. But does that mean we can put unrealistic expectations on them? No. And, they are, at the end of the day, dogs. And there's this phrase, there's all this pressure amongst Newf people, to sort of deal with that stereotype of them being sort of these angelic stuffed robots, and it's not fair. There's this phrase that gets thrown around a lot of, oh well, that Newf's not, we're not a babysitter type, and that's the majority of Newfs, honestly. I would say, is, yeah, they are really sweet, they're really gentle, they're really cool dogs, but they're dogs, and we have to always remember that, and we have to cherish that, and we have to want that, and not expect them to just be these stuffed animals, because that's where we fail them. And then the last question is one of my favorite questions, which is, what is one thing you wish you knew before you got one? And I love that question because I did tons of research, obviously. I have loved Newfoundlands my whole life. I knew amazing sport Newfoundlands when I was involved in agility when I was a teenager. I thought they were the coolest, and I always wanted a Newfoundland. So before we got a Newf, I was super familiar with the breed, though I had never had one. Did tons of research, definitely thought I was fully prepared. And I think no matter what breed of dog you get, there's always going to be things you will never know until you have them. And I would say the biggest thing I wish I had known was how challenging it would be to deal with other people around having a giant. And I mean that in a couple of ways. So I was definitely, and this is my bias from having come from like dog show worlds, was I was just under the assumption that like when people understood what large dogs were, that they understood that giants were part of that. But that's not the case. I did not realize that not every vet clinic was going to be prepared to handle a Newfoundland or to handle a giant-sized dog. And some of that was that we lived in New York, but when she got spayed, she had spayed and peck-seed to prevent bloat, and our vet had to partner with a sister practice to use their surgical center because hers wasn't big enough to safely handle a giant dog. And she had lots of giant dog experience. She had apprenticed under a Mastiff breeder who was also a vet, and she was doing her residency. I guess it's not apprenticing, whatever they call it when it's residency. So she had lots of experience with giants, but her personal practice wasn't large enough for a giant. So that's something I wish that I had realized that would be an issue. Also, things like finding qualified pet sitters to, we don't travel now because it's a pandemic, but before that, like when we travel, we have a pet sitter who stays at our house with our dogs and cats, and follows my pages and pound pages of rules for how to care for them. And I hadn't realized how challenging it would be to find qualified care for somebody who was experienced and comfortable being around a giant dog, which goes hand in hand with just in general. I didn't realize that people who like dogs or like big dogs would really not know what to do with a giant. And I find it so funny because she's a really small giant. She's only 106 pounds. She's very tiny and petite. But I think it's just been fascinating. So yeah, I guess I wish I knew that. It wouldn't have changed anything, obviously, about the decisions we made to grow our family and add a Newf, but it's been a kind of an interesting challenge of making sure that when something or some place says, oh yeah, we're dog friendly, they mean that they are all dog friendly, and they mean they are giant dog friendly, not just like large dog friendly like your lab and golden retrievers. So yeah, I guess that's something that took me completely by surprise. I didn't expect people to be so uncertain about how to interact with a giant dog. So those are some of my assumptions, feelings, thoughts about the questions and assumptions that I got about Newfoundlands. If you have more, please leave them in the description or the comment box below. I'd be happy to answer them in a future video. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up.